Welcome to How Science Happens, a podcast by Wally Paxton, DJ So, and Doug Tree, professors at Brigham Young University. In the podcast, we bring you stories of cutting-edge science as told by world-class scientists and engineers from around the world who are on the front lines doing the work. We explore the highs and lows of discovery and what makes science such an exhilarating and frustrating process for those who do it. And because we're nerds, maybe we'll even learn a little science along the way.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of How Science Happens. I'm Wally Paxton, and I'm here virtually with my friends Doug Tree.
Hello.
And DJ So.
Hey, everyone.
And I'm really excited today because we get to talk to my friend, Dr. Megan Boyle, who is a principal investigator at DuPont. So she's coming to us from Midland, Michigan. Hey, Megan, it's great to have you here.
Hello.
All right, well, we're going to get into your story. I just wanted to give a little bit of background about Megan. So she got her bachelor's degree from St. Mary's College with a degree in chemistry and a degree in mathematics, which to me starts to sound like chemical engineering a little bit when you're combining the two of those.
A little bit.
So you're in good company though. And then following her bachelor's degree, Megan went on to Northwestern University to earn a PhD in organic chemistry with Nobel laureate Fraser Stoddart, where I met you, and so that was a fun connection there. And if I remember right, you were doing a lot of what we called unnatural product synthesis and characterization. So Stoddart Group had a lot of rotaxanes and catenanes and some mechanically interlocked molecules. So now she's at DuPont. She is a research and development advocate of sustainability there, and we'll hear a little bit about that. But welcome, and we are so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how you got started in science. So I don't know how far back we have to go. Maybe you can help us with that. But when did you start feeling like you had an inclination or an interest in science and math?
Yeah, so I have a funny story there. I distinctly remember borrowing the A encyclopedia from my grandparents because I wanted to learn algebra at a really young age. And I mean, I completely bungled it. I'm surprised I could eventually learn algebra. So I was really interested at a young age. I also think teachers really make or break these subjects for people. So I remember my fourth grade teacher at least from my perspective, loved science. We would do things like monitor the weather, and I just loved that. It really sparked my interest in science. And then I can think of, at every level, a teacher that just really pushed me or inspired me, all the way up through grad school. So I really do think if you get the right teachers teaching math or science in a fun way, it clicks with you. That's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. That can make a huge difference. I think all of us have kind of an experience with a teacher that inspired us in some way along the way. So yes, definitely. And big shout out for encyclopedias too. I don't know if they even make those anymore, but
yeah, I kind of doubt it. But
yeah, we don't know Wikipedia in these days.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The first 5 Google searches is what we usually aim for now. But all right. So then you're in high school and you're starting to think college. So did you know that you wanted to go to college, or was this something that you kind of came to that understanding later?
Yeah, I mean, my parents went to college. My grandparents, who I were really, I was really close to my grandparents, they did not go to college, but they were very encouraging of my education and prioritizing it. So I think I had an expectation of myself even to go to college very early. I would say like where I wanted to go, none of that really started forming right until you're later in high school.
Sure.
But science, I was always drawn to science and excited to go to school for science. So,
well, and you landed a great place. And so tell us a little bit about your undergraduate degree and your experience there with both chemistry and math.
So by the way, are you from Illinois? Would you say Illinois is your hometown?
No, so I grew up on the south side of Indianapolis. So
Okay.
really typical Indiana upbringing, lots of time outside. I went to a public school. So I'm a Midwest, Midwest girl for sure. But yeah, so St. Mary's, I thought I wanted to go to Notre Dame and I toured Notre Dame, and as a backup, I toured St. Mary's as well. And I just fell in love and then didn't even apply to Notre Dame. I just had my eyes set on St. Mary's. I think seeing a school that was so focused on advancing women in these fields was just so inspiring to me. And, it was just so different, this private school environment and it was so beautiful there. So yeah, that's kind of what inspired me to go to St. Mary's. And I loved it there. The class sizes were really small. The labs, in Gen Chem and organic chemistry were also really small. So you really got to know your professors and lots of one-on-one time. And then, as a junior and senior, we were proctoring the lower level classes, which I think is a little bit unique because usually it's grad students that do that work. So I really enjoyed tutoring and running labs while I was at St. Mary's too. It helps you learn the subjects better too, right? To teach, you learn it better.
Yeah, definitely.
So I felt like I just got such a good foundation. I started as a chemistry major. I loved science, as I said, but I was taking kind of higher level math classes. And one of my professors, Dr. Miller, every time he'd return like a test or something that I had turned in, he would write on it, when are you going to join the math department? When are you going to be a math major? Finally, I relented. And I'm glad I did though, because this is a good segue into grad school. My undergraduate thesis was on topology, which is, it's like how you deform different shapes in space. And Fraser, of course, like he's the king of topology in chemistry. So it was like this perfect marriage of what I loved in
molecular
math.
topology, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's part of what drew me to Fraser. So yeah, it was a great marriage of the two subjects that I really, just loved in college.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to come back to you were proctoring and you were TA for some of the classes. So
Yeah.
does St. Mary's have a graduate program?
No. Gosh, I don't want to misspeak though. They might do a little more like research type stuff now, but at the time there was no, and they still don't give graduate degrees.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But you get some of that experience that sometimes people don't get until they become a graduate student as an upper division student there. So that's nice. And you didn't give up on your chemistry dreams either. So when you joined the math department, you did both.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's commendable. So then you went to Northwestern. Did you look at other schools, or was Northwestern like your target?
Yeah, so I did a research experience for undergrads at Northwestern for 2 summers. Sorry, just a second. Told you that was going to happen. Okay. Yeah, so I did a research experience for undergrad for 2 summers at Northwestern. So I definitely, liked the school, was heavily considering going there. I also applied, I think, to 2 other schools. I know I got rejected from one of them. I can't remember what the third one was. I was thinking about that this morning because I think ultimately once I got into Northwestern, I was so excited to come back to Chicago and the comfort of kind of knowing where you were going. I was really excited about that. So yep. So that's where I landed.
Yeah. And no looking back then, if you can't remember the other place.
I know, right? I can't remember the other one, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And so then you joined as, did you have a few other groups that you were looking at, or were you looking primarily at Fraser's group?
Yeah, so I'm also interested because did you do a similar thing while you were doing undergraduate research, or it was a totally different thing?
It was different. So when I did the research experience, I did those under Sanbin Wen. So he specifically in his group, I was doing like some different DNA sensing technologies. And I mean, I really loved that work. I really respected Sanbin, and I was really tempted to stay in that group because I also loved the students that were there. I had just
Mhm.
such a great relationship with them. But I
Mhm.
think ultimately, I thought, well, it's probably better to get this varied experience, right? Not to just keep doing the same thing the whole time. It would be
Mhm.
better for my
Okay.
development if I tried something new.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned earlier, uh, I was really caught up in the excitement of Fraser doing this topology.
Mhm.
How ironic is that? I just did my
Yeah.
thesis on topology, and here's a chemist doing that.
Right.
So I was excited about that too. So I did make the switch kind of in the fall when you start thinking about what group to join. That's
Uh-huh.
that's when I
Mhm.
made the switch. So
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, very cool. So tell us just briefly about what kinds of things you did as a graduate student.
yeah, so I keep saying topology. So at the time, Fraser was really well known for the synthesis of these rotaxanes and catenanes, which, the catenane is the interlocking rings. A rotaxane is kind of like a dumbbell with the ring around it.
Mhm.
And I guess the mark that I made, I was working with a couple of the postdocs to functionalize what we call the blue box.
Mhm.
Wally will probably remember that
Yeah,
term,
that's
but
right.
but it was the cationic ring that it was one of the rings in a lot of these chemistries, a lot of these topologies. So we were working to functionalize that to make like a self complexing, what we ended up calling a figure of 8. So I mean, you might ask like, oh, what's the application for that? How much does that matter? I think the really great thing about that is all of the skills that you learn making a molecule like that. I mean, you're learning the synthesis, you're having to think about the topology, which I keep
Mhm.
mentioning that I loved, and then purifying the characterization, all of those skills really can be applied to so many other fields in chemistry. So I think it was, just a great experience to learn like each step of that process. And at one point, I think I was in charge of, you're making me think about my memory back in my memory here, but one of the HPLCs or something. And so that was good experience to learn how to set that up, how to troubleshoot it when there were problems. Um, all of that work just is so helpful in industry for sure, to be able to know how to do those things and learn them if you don't, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've always thought that organic chemistry is the closest thing to potions in
yeah.
in Harry
Yeah.
Potter language, where you can make pretty much anything. And so then it becomes, you've learned these basic skills where you've made these interesting molecules for scientific curiosity and for understanding how molecules will assemble, and now you can use that to make lots of different things. And not only
Mhm.
that, but you can prove that you've actually made the molecule that you set out to make. And that's not trivial, especially with the kinds of complicated molecules that are synthesized these days.
Definitely. I I think that's so true that um the step of proving that we had made, that figure of 8 or any, whatever project you were working on, that that was not a trivial process, right? You,
Right.
you had to learn a lot. You really had to collect a lot of data. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's
What?
really true.
Because you've come to the edge of human knowledge, and like nobody has ever made this kind of molecule before. So there's not a reference that you can go to and say, well, yeah, it looks just like that. No, you have to like demonstrate that this is what we did and this is how we know it. And then
How
you're the
many
standard for
times
somebody later, right?
Yeah, how many times did you wish that you could just like put on some goggles and
Mm.
see,
Yeah, that's
did
right.
I make this?
That's right. And you can't,
Yeah.
we have to use other methods. We have to like grope around in the dark and
Yes.
find
Yeah.
little pieces of evidence that will build the case. So
Isn't that science though, right?
yeah, pretty much. And so that can be incredibly valuable regardless of where you end up going, but certainly in an industrial lab, where now you get to use what you've learned to apply to some products and things that people are actually using and doing things with, and
Mhm, mhm.
not actually using, but you know what I'm saying, like that there's a more broad market for the kinds of things and the kinds of skills that you have now.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I
all
have a
right.
couple questions. You I think you said a figure of eight, and you said about ring. So can you tell me a little bit about it? So what kind of ring are you talking about? Are you talking about aromatic rings or like cyclopentane rings, things like that?
Yeah, so the hopefully Fraser doesn't think that I explained this incorrectly. It's been 10 years, right? But there was a cationic ring that we call blue box. And actually, if you look at a lot of his papers, it's almost always color-coded blue. But that ring, we basically functionalized the aromatic ends of, so that you could put like glycol linkages or
okay.
what have you. And then in our case, we put like an electron-rich aromatic center that would self-complex back into that cationic ring and form, if you were to trace it, a figure of eight. So kind of a clever naming there, but
okay.
Yeah, so it's driven by these donor electron deficient and electron rich interactions.
Exactly.
And that causes this complexation so that you could create structures with these interesting topologies that don't
Yes.
exist in nature.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So from Northwestern University, I did want to ask a couple of other questions about this because sometimes when you're like in the grind of graduate school, because you get really focused on your project and maybe nervous about what comes next. I'm just curious if there were times when you were kind of maybe a little concerned about where you were and like what you were going to do next and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Especially that last year when you're writing up your thesis, thinking about how you spent the last 4 years of your life, right?
Right.
What am I going to do with this? Sometimes it's hard when you're so narrow in something. It's hard to see, well, how is anyone ever going to hire me to do something that I know nothing about, right?
Right.
And there's this popular term, imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I definitely had that. How to, gosh, I faked it to get here, right?
Right.
No one is going to want me to do any other chemistry because all I know is this, these strange little molecules, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that a lot of graduate students just don't. They think that in order for their degree to have meant something, they have to go do exactly what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they start out looking for that, like, oh, if I don't do exactly what I was doing. And like you say, there's a lot of technical skills that you're learning that are broadly applicable, and you might not realize like how broadly applicable. And then there's also a lot of just broader thought skills that you've acquired along the way, how to present, how to write, how to analyze data, how to think about something, how to solve a problem when no one solved it before.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that kind of thing that you also don't realize is incredibly valuable. Right. And that people want someone who can do those things.
Yeah. I mean, you said it perfectly. You said all the things that I would have listed that I had to learn were skills elsewhere. Right. And I think, I think in Fraser's group, we got great at writing. He was a perfectionist when it came to writing and presenting. And that felt hard, at times. But now I would say I'm not scared at all to give a presentation at work. I love writing. It's one of my favorite things to do at work is, writing up papers, writing up my work, helping other people write up their work. So yeah, there's a skill set there that you may not realize when you're in it, but you grow a lot during those 4 or 5 years or however long it takes.
Yeah, that's right. You start coming out with this, you start, that last year of graduate school, you feel like you're a particular shape and you're like looking for the perfect hole for you to fit into. And it doesn't work like that. And in some, I mean, because you've been through that, but some people that are listening to this might think, well, I don't know how this is going to fit, but it will. There are other things that you're not maybe paying attention to that will fit. And so I think it's important to, you have a good mentor that can help you think about those skills and make sure that you're highlighting the things that are going to be relevant to the places that you're applying. So
Yeah.
So
yeah.
then because of that, then you went on to, what was the job search like for you?
So I used, I did some interviewing at the ACS conferences. I Northwestern had a really great, I mean, we had lots of companies coming in, so I always took advantage of any kind of events or companies coming in. And then I interviewed with a handful of companies. And, I should speak about that too. I was really nervous about that as well, right? I mean, how to present yourself, and what skills do I have? So, it's really related to this subject we're talking about here, being able to talk about your skills and not think that it's just that narrow slice of the chemistry or whatever field you're in, is really important. And one thing that somebody said to me that really stuck with me is that if you get to the point where a company is sitting down with you for an hour to interview, or even more so if they're flying you out to come interview at their company, your resume has spoken for itself. They trust that you have the smarts, they trust that you have the education. They're really looking for, does this person get along with other people? Can they think creatively? Are they comfortable in this field? Like in my case, polyurethane chemistry, I did not even know what that word meant when I started my job. So, but they didn't care because they cared that I was comfortable in that space. So, my advice to anyone interviewing is just be yourself. Talk about the broad skills that you have and try, it's easier said than done, but try to find that confidence and, be confident in yourself.
Yeah.
There's this right balance between like humility and confidence, right? Because you don't want to go in and assume like, I've got the job, I'm the best thing. Like you've probably, since like been in interviews where someone just thinks they're awesome, right? And it's an immediate turn off, right? But on the other hand, like if you don't have confidence, right, you're really nervous and you can come off like clingy, or I don't know what's the right, like you sort of just like not projecting that you can do the job. And then also that makes it, you seem like you're not as warm and able to get along with people, right? So there's that balance you have to somehow find between those.
Yeah. So you interviewed at more than one place.
I did.
That is, and I think that's really good to know too, because you go to places and each one of those, they are maybe making decisions based on things that you have no control over. Like you said, you're bright, you're talented, you have skills. They want to come out and see if you're going to be a good fit. And sometimes you're just not, and they're making a decision. And it's just, I think it's important to not take it too personally when you're going through that process, because that imposter syndrome can really kick in when you're like, well, I didn't get the job, I guess I'm not. And you're like, no. It's sometimes it comes down to things you just don't have control over.
Yeah. And I mean, being on the other side of it too, a company, a business may interview folks, and then maybe something happens with the economy, or, any number of things could happen and they can't hire anyone that year. And so that, that really has nothing to, you may have really enjoyed someone that you interviewed, but if there's not the budget to hire them, that's it, and I think often companies will try to communicate that that's the reason why, but not always, right?
So you just keep trying and you hustle, and then you end up at some place like DuPont.
Yeah.
So let's transition a little bit then, unless there's anything you want to say about starting at DuPont or how that happened, we can jump right into the paper too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I will take a moment to talk about what polyurethanes are, because it will matter for the paper.
Okay, great.
And just to help paint this picture of me coming to work first day and not even, I even look back in some of my notes. Did I ever learn what a polyurethane reaction was? I don't think I did, So just really simply, polyurethane, it's the reaction of a polyol. So, alcohol groups, many alcohol groups, the reaction of a polyol with an isocyanate. And so an isocyanate is the NCO, carbon, oxygen, double bonds between them. It's a very efficient, quick reaction. Excuse me. When we talk about polyurethane foams, I mean, you're literally doing bucket chemistry. You're taking two canisters or 2 containers of these chemicals and you're spraying them on a wall, and the chemistry is happening right there. So very different than grad school. There's no purifying, there's no characterizing. You're just hoping that you make a nice foam with whatever you chose to put in these buckets, right? I mean, it's more advanced than that, but
Sure.
by comparison, it's really very different way of thinking about chemistry. So that's, in general, that's the space that I work in our building and construction business.
Okay. Yeah. So from the paper, so I'm just gonna read the title, and then we'll kind of walk through it. This is low GWP 2-component low pressure spray foam using CO2 as a blowing agent. And I'm gonna guess that the foam, this is polyurethane foams.
Correct.
But if you can help us understand the other parts of that, like GWP, for example.
Yep. So GWP stands for global warming potential. So, I would guess most listeners know a little bit about the greenhouse gas effect, but just, very briefly, the gases in our atmosphere, of course, trap heat from the sun, and they heat our atmosphere. And that is a vital part of life, right? We want our environment to be warm. We want to grow plants. We want to exist, right? But lately, as we've been dumping a lot of CO2 into our environment, and maybe more specific to our industry, we've been dumping gases that are, orders of magnitude more potent in terms of global warming potential than CO2 into the atmosphere. And so all of these things are what kind of charge this warming up of the atmosphere. So for this paper, low GWP, what we're doing is we're taking some of the gases that historically have been used in these foams to make that cellular structure, to make the low density. A lot of those gases are high global warming potential. So they're, this industry has gone through some transitions. At one point, we were using ozone depleting chemicals. We got out of those, but the replacement was high global warming potential. So now we're trying to get out of, we're trying to transition into low global warming potential. So I'm thinking about the words of the title again. So what we're doing is the whole industry has proposed these new, they're called hydrofluoroolefins. So they're fluorinated gases, but they have a double bond in them. And so that double bond makes them, susceptible to breakdown by ozone in the environment. So they're not high global warming potential anymore. However, we use a lot of strong catalysts to make this chemistry happen up on the wall. Or wherever you're applying it. And so, as you can imagine, these double bonds are also susceptible to attack by, a strong nucleophilic catalyst. So some of the blowing agents don't work very well for our application. So I would say the innovative piece of what we did is we chose a liquefied gas that was more stable with the catalyst we wanted to use, but we also used CO2 directly as the gas. And sorry. As someone outside of the industry, that may not sound, super neat, but it's actually been something we've been talking about for a long time. How can we just use CO2, something pretty inert compared to these chemicals that have, like I said, GWPs that are 1,000 times that of CO2. How can we use something inert to make these foams? So it was really exciting when we were able to finally do it. Yeah.
So those gases are not because of the reaction, but you intentionally put those gases as a blowing agent, is it right? It's not part of the reaction, it's just blowing agent, is it?
Yep, so they're called physical blowing agents. They're just, I mentioned that we put our chemicals in cylinders. So they're liquefied gases they're almost always liquefied gases that we actually put in the cylinder. So then when you go and you spray these two chemicals out through like a hose and then a gun with a nozzle on it, it mixes the chemicals, and then that pressure drop causes, the molecules to become gaseous, and that's how you make this foam. Like you can imagine shaving cream, right? Like that's
Yeah.
in a small canister.
Mhm.
When you spray it out, it expands. Very
Yeah.
similar type of
So-
process.
And sorry, DJ, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. So I'm asking you this question because I'm thinking about doing my basement. My basement is not finished. And
Yes,
I know
okay.
that people use a lot of this kind of agents for the insulation and the insulation. And I'm curious, that's the reason why I watch a lot of YouTube videos these days about how to
Yeah.
finish basement.
About
And
finishing
I
the basement.
saw, yeah, I saw these people using this one without any mask or something, mask or personal protective gears. So in the previous, I know the CO2 is, it's not harmful to human, but previously they are using different gases. Are they? Then do they pose a health concern as well?
Yeah, so I'm not sure which products you were watching videos
Okay.
of, but buy froth pack to seal your basement first of all, and get a registered contractor to do it for you.
Okay.
I have to say that.
I was thinking about doing myself, by the way.
But you're not anymore.
No.
I mean, to be honest, if you have someone who knows what they're doing, it really, you're going to get a nice seal in your basement if you find someone who knows what they're doing and you use froth pack. But you do need to wear a respirator, especially, when you're
Okay.
indoors. And it's not just because of the gases that we use, but isocyanates are,
Okay.
you don't want to breathe those in. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
definitely, you should wear a respirator, you should wear gloves, you should cover your skin. So if you're watching videos of people doing it without those,
Okay.
we should correct them. Yeah.
So that answered one of my questions, because I'm thinking, well, what are these foams used for? And so this is the kind of thing that you'd use to like seal cracks in a basement or for
Yes.
insulation. And so for construction, you're in the building and construction unit.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
okay.
we offer a whole slew of products, everything from what we call the great stuff to seal small gaps and cracks in your home or window fenestrations,
Mhm.
all the way up to froth pack, which is, what this paper is about, which is a larger product that is also used for sealing, but can also be used for full coverage insulation. To keep the heat, when you heat your home, you want to try to keep that heat in and not just let it go out through
Right.
your walls, right?
Right. And so these cellular foams are really good at those insulating properties and the sealing properties.
Yes. And
Okay.
yeah, and in and of themselves, they are a great tool for helping, stop the effects of climate change, right? You don't
Mhm.
want, especially, a house in Michigan, right? When it's 10 degrees outside, you don't want to be wasting a lot of energy heating that home and then having that heat leak out of your home, right? So if a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions come from wasted energy in buildings.
Mhm.
So, I think we have a great value proposition for these products in and of themselves, but we really wanted to make that transition even further and get out of these, high global warming potential raw materials that we're reusing, right, to even make the product. So
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about how these hydrofluoroolefins, that they are reactive with some of the catalysts that you use for the polyurethane formation.
mhm.
So, so instead of just using the hydrofluoroolefins, you also used carbon dioxide. Is there a reason that you need the hydrofluoroolefin at all now?
Yeah, so yes, so the foams, like I said, the space that we play in is called the low pressure space. So you
Okay.
can go and hire a contractor to use what's called a high pressure spray foam. So that's,
Mhm.
we're talking like 1,000 PSI, right? So they've
Yeah.
got a rig, they're pressurizing their chemicals and spraying them. In this case, like you can buy a kit at Home Depot, and you really need the gaseous blowing agent to help push those chemicals out of these self-contained cylinders.
Uh-huh.
But the liquid blowing agent helps give you, as this reaction is heating, it helps you give you that density, that rise.
Uh-huh.
So you really, in our case, we felt like we really needed both a liquid and a gaseous blowing agent, if you
Uh-huh.
will, to make these good properties that
Okay.
frothback has.
Because what's happening, it's not just that this gas is what's pushing out the chemicals onto the wall, it's also playing a part in the foam formation, right? Like
Exactly.
there's this part where it's hitting the wall, they're starting to react, but then you have to have the right, I don't know, viscosity or elasticity or whatever it is of the sort of foam as it's building, right? And to get the
Correct.
right
Yeah.
insulation and sealant properties and whatnot that you want, right? And so you've got to balance all those things in that can,
Exactly.
right? Of what you're putting in there is going to result in what the foam is, right?
Yes, and buildings, there are a lot of building codes, right? So these products often have to meet a standard of different
Mhm.
properties. So,
Fire resistant.
exactly.
And
Yep. Yep. So,
yep.
so there's a lot of,
You don't want to spray it on the wall and then you have a birthday party and all of a sudden your wall engulfs in flame because the foam that you used
exactly.
to insulate wasn't flame retardant or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Yeah.
I explained in the simple terms that we have polyol and isocyanate that react with each other, but of course there are other additives for
Mhm.
all of these
Mm.
reasons, right? Like you want to make a really nice foam, you want it to be fire resistant, you want it to last a long time. So that, a lot of the chemistry that I do as formulation work, to try to, meet all of those properties.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's why, like, when you get that's why that's the magic of the product, right? Like that's like if it was just a basic chemistry that you described, like the cyanate and the polyol, like everybody kind of knows that, but it's the 25 different things that you're adding or the 100 different things, right? That makes it hard and complicated and it's a mess. And the art of figuring that out is what sort of is the special sauce, right?
And they give
Yes, I
it
like that
just the
word
right
art.
properties. The
Yeah.
art, yeah.
Yep.
So I want to point out there's a really interesting part that I want to read. It says, the research team overcame substantial challenges to enable the use of CO2. And so I wonder kind of what challenges you had to overcome when you're trying to
Yep.
use CO2 here.
Yeah, so CO2 is not very soluble in these liquids the chemistry that we're
Yeah,
doing.
okay.
So compared to some of the gaseous blowing agents that have been used in the past, CO2, you can't get very much of it in. So, there's the chemistry innovations, what do we have to do with the formulation to make it work, to get a good foam? But then there's this whole dispensing technology art, actually, of, how do you mix these chemicals? How do you get it to foam? How do you get it to spray up on the wall? So we have some patents pending, around that technology that we use for mixing and spraying, because the CO2, like I said, you can't use very much of it. So we've got to do something different to make it spray well.
Right.
And
so
then
it's not just the composition of matter patent, but the method of delivery patent as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or patents, I should say, because I'm sure there's multiple things.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then even, there's no patents in this space, but even our, how we manufacture it is different. So we had some challenges that we had to work through there. And I'll say that is one of my favorite things about this project, that it was just the broad array of people that I worked with. I mean, I was working with and talking to regularly people who were on the plant floor making these products, all the way back to, my analytical colleagues who are helping analyze, the chemistry that we're doing. So it was exciting. It was one of my favorite projects to work on, because you just get to see that whole breadth of development.
So
it's really fun.
In this paper, I see 4 names: your name and probably Dr. Richard and Schroeder, and then Michelle Doug. So I know that you're organic chemist. I mean, what did they do for this project?
Yep. So Dan Schreier is an engineer. So he was really doing a lot of the like dispensing technology.
Okay.
DuPont has 3D printers, right? Like we were using a lot of kind of innovative ways to work on the nozzles, which I think there's a picture in the paper that might be a bit hard to explain, but he was working a lot on that. Michelle Hudak is another chemist like me, so she leads a lot of chemistry projects. And then Mark Rickard, he is an analytical chemist, but he is just a great thought partner, just a really innovative person. So he was often someone that we were always brainstorming with.
Mhm.
And there are 4 names on that paper, but like I said, we were talking to manufacturing all the time. We were talking to marketing all the time.
Mhm.
There's in this business, there's building codes. So you also got to work closely with people who know that really well.
Mhm.
So if I listed all those people, it'd probably be, 25 people, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think that highlights something that sometimes, I mean, we see that a little bit depending on the research group that you're in, but there is an awful lot of teamwork to pull off the challenges that you're trying to address. And there's not just one person or a couple of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Certainly you can have those discussions with a good thought partner. And I love the way that you said that, because that also highlights that it's not just the skills that you bring, but it's the way that you think about things and the creativity that you can bring to a project. And so you've got all of these people working together to put something like this together. And it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Collaboration, I just think, is so important for innovation. I love, we'll have brainstorming sessions. Maybe someone will come in with some half-baked idea. Someone else will build on it. A third person will build on it. And before you know it, an hour or 2 later, we've got this whole research platform planned.
Yeah.
And you cannot do that alone, So I love the diversity of thought that I've experienced at DuPont. And I know it happens, in all places of science, but for any listener, I would really encourage, don't live on an island. Don't try to do things by yourself. It's so important to talk to other people and work together.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's see. I think this brings us to our last question. And this is sort of like where you get to just reimagine things. What would you do if you were to go back to college and start again, and you couldn't study chemistry or math?
Yeah, so this is a really relevant question right now. I hated writing, like in high school and in college. I didn't love English class, like even literature. I was not into it, right? And, in grad school, you start writing a little more, and I started to appreciate what a flow state would be, where you get into the state where you're just feeding information. So I started to I kind of appreciate this more. And now, on a personal note, now that I've had children, I feel like something in me has shifted. I can't read enough. I love writing to express my feelings about, my kids. And it's kind of bled over into my work, in that now I'm reading more about sustainability, and I like just writing about it. And I think the beauty of this is I don't have to do it all over again, right? There's ways to incorporate that passion into science. And in a lot of ways, it's really important, right? Because scientists kind of have this reputation of being terrible at communicating, right? So if I can kind of hone that skill, work on what you love, I think that, it's a great compliment to doing science. So writing would be my answer.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic answer. And the fact that you don't necessarily have to go back and relive, there are ways to incorporate some of those things into what you're doing right now. And I love that blending those things together.
Yeah.
Well, hey, this has been a lot of fun to have you on the show, Megan, and it's really great to reconnect. And so thank you so much.
This is fun. Yeah.
And it's really fun to hear all of the different places that people have gone to, and the many different ways that you can make a living as a PhD scientist or engineer.
It's true. Yeah. It's been so great to talk to you guys.
Our guest today has been Megan Thomas from DuPont. You can find out more about Dr. Thomas's work by looking at the show notes for this episode at anchor.fm/howscience. And you've been listening to How Science Happens with Wally Paxton, DJ So, and Doug Tree. As always, remember to subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating. This helps other people find the show. And you can also find and interact with us more on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. And so we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How Science Happens with your hosts Wally Paxton, DJ So, and Doug Tree. For more information about the podcast, the hosts, or our guests, please visit our website at bit.ly/howscience. For additional comments or questions, we can be reached by email at howscience@byu.edu.